Welcome back. The next session will also be a panel discussion moderated by Ben Wagner. We will have a specific focus on IXPs, their impact on national networks, potential for internet freedoms, and role for the future of the net in general. So please, warm welcome to our panelists and our moderator.
Please. Please. So Moez first, and then order exactly. Julian, Moez. No.
You're at the other end or the center?
No. So Moez, you.
Sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry. Scary.
Okay, and then you need to move over one. Perfect. Musical chairs. So thank you all for coming. This is a discussion about internet exchange points and their importance for the global internet infrastructure. We have 4 wonderful panelists here. My name is Ben Wagner from European University Institute, and in some way or another, I think we have some of the best people in the room to discuss these issues at this point in time. On the right, Moez Shakshuk from the ATI, Klaus Landefeld from DE6, which is the German internet exchange point. Then we have Weil from Google, I believe, and also very involved in internet exchange point issues. And then to my direct right, we have Gillian York from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who has also worked a great deal on the globalness and openness of the internet. So, without further ado, I'd like to start with Moez. If you could provide us with a few words.
Yeah. Working? Yeah. Hello. So my name is Moez Shakshuk. I'm CEO of the Tunisian Internet Agency. And the Tunisian Internet Agency is somehow a complicated history, but it had been created in 1996 as an internet exchange point, but has never been declared as an internet exchange point. So, and it was used by the regime, the former regime, Ben Ali, to censor the internet, to survey, and to do a lot of awful things, let me say, today. And all those happened for different years, for many years. And what we tried after the revolution is just to clarify the role of the ITI, because ITI, the Tunisian Internet Agency, was supposed to be abolished after the revolution, and we were under pressure from different actors, including the civil society, the government, the politicians, the private sector, who want to abolish ITI. But when we abolish ITI, that means that we abolish the unique internet exchange point in the country. And what we wanted to do is to defend the ITI and to clarify the role. So we started dealing with this issue, and we discussed a lot of issues about it, about internet exchange point. And actually, now we have not just one internet exchange point, because we launched recently Tune IXP, and it is member of the EuroWix actually. And last week we had a workshop with different experts, with a lot of experts coming from Europe and from the region, and we launched a second internet exchange point in the country. So it was for us a rewarding process. But what I need to mention about this process is just we cannot really achieve all those all that without ensuring freedom online. You know.
Can I just ask a quick question, Moez? Could you explain briefly for the audience what exactly is an internet exchange
point?
Oh
yeah, sure. For me, it's tough. Yeah, okay. For me, it's obvious, but you know, when you have a lot of operators and the ISPs, they need to connect each other. So the most efficient way to connect to each other is to put a point where everyone can connect to that point, and then we can guarantee that local contents cannot transit via other countries. So we keep the value in the country and we can promote internet. This is very important, but it is also confusing for us, because as we played this role for years, this point was also used for security reasons, because when you have all the traffic routed via one point, that means that you can censor with this point. You can control somehow the traffic routed by the equipments. So it was somehow complicated for us after the revolution to say, okay, we are not censoring the internet. We won't censor anymore. Internet will be open. Internet will be free. But at the same time, we raised the issue. We need to keep our primary role, which is an internet exchange point. So having an internet exchange point in the country, that means it's for us very important, as we are actually the first internet exchange point in the Maghreb. And also, we are trying to promote freedom online through that model. And what is important also to mention about in this early stage, that we say, as we advocate open internet and the freedom online, that means that also we need to be open to the civil society. That was somehow very, very important, tough thing to do with the ITI, because ITI was considered as a devil of internet for years. A lot of people hated it, and now I think we try to open the doors to the civil society to talk and to open spaces. And of course, when we open spaces, that means, okay, you can come to work with us, we are open. And this is, I think, one of the roles of the Internet Exchange Point in the country. So this is very important.
Just another quick question. It sounds like Internet Exchange Points are very important for the Internet to work, but you didn't have one in Tunisia before, so how did the Internet get to Tunisia?
Technically, we have one,
okay.
But it never played a role clearly for Internet Exchange Point, because first, when we have an Internet Exchange Point, you need to be neutral. ITI wasn't neutral for years. A lot of contents have been blocked, a lot of things have been dealt with the regime politically. So actually, one of the most important things with our new Internet Exchange Points, as we have two now, so is to deal with neutrality. I think we still have a lot of work to do on this field, but this is our principles actually. And as I mentioned before, we cannot really reach our goals without the engagement of the civil society. And this is a commitment for us to work with. And actually, you know that as we are promoting freedom online, we will also the organizer of a big conference that we held in Tunis in June, the 16th, 17th, and the 18th of June. So it will be in Tunis, a Freedom Online conference. And this is somehow a big challenge for us, because we are moving from an internet who is completely censored and under surveillance, and now we are promoting, as a country, as a whole country, promoting the freedom online. So this is for us very important, and we're looking forward to welcome you in Tunis, because it's very important for us. My last comment is it will be about also during this conference we will launch an open space, for open innovation. It will be in the basement of ITI. You know, when the censorship started, it started from the basement of ITI. Our technical department was in the basement. I don't know if you visited or yeah. So this basement is very important. It's symbolic for the civil society. What you want during the conference is we'll open the doors of these basements. So hacktivists will come, hackers will come to ITI to play with our censorship equipments. And also, we will do a lot of funny things in this basement. So it will be for us a symbol. So we will launch the name of this open lab will be a 404 lab. 404 means censorship, you know, the code, very famous for ITI. It's been labeled for years as a 404. Now, okay, you use the same label to say, okay, it's an open innovation lab. Okay. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much. I think those are several wonderful examples of what's going on in Tunisia right now, and what sort of the importance of an internet exchange point can be, especially in a country like Tunisia.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of commitment to make this internet exchange point as really a worthy example, because it's very important to know that, you know, in the Maghreb, so if you look the Maghreb, so Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and Mauritania, so this is the great Maghreb, and there is no internet exchange point. We have in Egypt, but not in Tunisia, not in Maghreb, not in the region. So it's very important to position Tunisia as a hub for this region, and also Tunisia could play an important role as an example, as I mentioned before, because, okay, we had long experience, we have, in terms of statistics, the use of internet is very high in the country, and this is somehow, we are working with Algerians and Libyans actually to interconnect to our network, and we really try to promote the connectivity between an internet exchange point. And this could not really achieve it without the commitment of the government first, because we need to be also very, very careful with this, because internet exchange points are not to be regulated. We know we're still facing some problems with this, and I think our friend from Egypt also, we talk about it, because it's very important to keep internet exchange point non-regulated thing. And for us, you know, we have an amendment recently, and they introduced a definition, so we're really working on this to make things happen very, very clearly and very smoothly. We don't need regulation on internet exchange point, and our answer to that amendment of the code is say, okay, we had one, now we have two internet exchange points, so if you need to authorize the first one, you need also to authorize the second one. And maybe it will be another one really soon. Who knows?
Thank you, and that's a beautiful example, because only a few days ago we had a workshop where colleagues of Klaus were together with Moez in Tunis and helping the Tunisian internet exchange point, the internet governance there, build and develop. And so I wonder if Klaus could say a few words about how internet exchange points work in a more general sense and how they're specifically structured.
Yeah. Well, of course, I come from the other end of the spectrum, D6 being one of the largest, if not the largest, internet exchange in the world. This is also why ICO, who is the owner of D6, kind of like sponsored this session. My general ideas, and I wanted to give a short introduction on what really drives internet exchange points, on why they are important. In principle, there was an old way of doing business. And there's still a handful of networks who consider themselves so-called tier 1 networks, which is basically very large global networks. And everybody who wanted to connect to the global internet needed to buy upstream connectivity from these guys. That is not very efficient. Smaller ISPs needed to go through them. That can be easily controlled, but there's still a lot of networks who operate this way. They simply buy upstream from one party, and they're happy with it and view it as their model. However, the new way being 10 to 15 years by now, so it's not really new in internet terms, but obviously there's another way to do it, which is connecting to an internet exchange point. So basically find one way to exchange data directly with as many other networks as possible, one location. What's the advantage here? There are several advantages. One is cost, another is latency, bandwidth, and obviously network resilience. And I wanted to have a look into this. One of the most important parts, and that's for all participants, and that is even going down obviously to the users then, is cost. Traffic being passed through an exchange is typically not billed by any party. So it is very cost efficient to exchange traffic through an exchange. But what happens after you actually do that is that also upstream costs surrounding that exchange significantly drop. So if you're in a country or in a location where there's just a monopolist upstream provider, something like that, you typically pay at least several tens of, maybe even $100 per megabit per month for upstream connectivity. If you're in the region of a larger exchange, that typically drops to a handful of dollars per megabit. And on the really large installations like D6 or M6 and so on, you're actually well below $1 per megabit by now.
So just to ask you a question, that means we're basically talking about differences in a factor of 100?
Yes.
1,000?
Yes,
so
we are. Yeah, difference
connectivity becomes 1,000 times cheaper.
Yeah, it's hundreds of the cost in other regions. And that obviously is a very important factor. And that is not what you can exchange locally. So that is only the fraction you still need to push through your upstream. So it's actually a tremendous gain for every provider connected to the exchange. Obviously other factors like latency for streaming services, or the total bandwidth, the speed with which you reach local sites, which, let's be clear, most people use national or local sites. The international traffic is only a fraction of the total traffic. Obviously most people want to converse in their own language and using services from their home country. That is something which is enabled by an IXP as well. It is a tremendously successful model. So worldwide, there are roughly 400 exchanges by now. Africa is, I've just pulled it up this morning, is around 25, something like that. In Latin America, it's around 50. Asia Pacific, it's something like 80 exchanges. North America, around 90, which is strangely enough growing now. I've just noticed that the North Americans have decided to build more exchanges lately. And in Europe, it's around 150 exchanges. So there's a huge amount of exchanges worldwide. The largest exchanges, let's use D6 as an example, because I know that best. We're well over 2 terabits right now in traffic. But that is only what you see in the statistics. Even more important is what happens surrounding the exchange. D6 currently has around 500 carrier networks connected, but there is roughly 5,000 private lines not going through the exchange, but just in the buildings surrounding the exchange, interconnecting these carriers. We had a study done lately which found that there's roughly 50,000 individual network connections between the networks being run on a peering base surrounding the exchange. That is not taking into account the more or less anonymous peering which is done through the route servers. So the actual number is even higher. So if you have a large exchange, that is what is happening. And that is enabled also by the smaller exchanges. The amount of connectivity being reached by having an exchange, having an IP gravity point in your country is way larger than just the exchange itself. And that is really the beauty of building a larger national exchange. The rest will come over time. That is something which is happening in the more broadband developed countries today, that you also have more localized metropolitan exchanges for video services and things like that, but that does not have the same cost benefit and the same advantages. But that, in short, is what is happening if you have a larger or successful exchange, and I believe that this will be happening in most of the countries. It's interesting to see that that even in Europe we have countries where there was no national exchange which ever became successful. And strangely enough, in these countries, upstream bandwidth or bandwidth in general is still more expensive than in other European countries. One example being France, for example. You pay roughly 10 times what you pay in Frankfurt or in Amsterdam for bandwidth, because they never managed to agree on one national exchange to run it.
And
so
here's just one thing. I mean, if you think France is bad, again, we just had a conversation in the workshop in Tunisia where French network engineers were saying, thank you, Tunisians, for not having an exchange. You're paying for our engineers. This is wonderful. So the whole of North Africa is basically paying for French bandwidth, which is very expensive as a result of. So, I mean, France is maybe difficult compared to Germany, but there are a lot worse examples.
Yes, there are. But there's also, I mean, as D6, we've lately looked into other regions as well. For example, we started an exchange in Dubai, which has the same drive. I'd say that in the Gulf region there was nothing comparative to a neutral exchange, and there actually the government has decided that they needed kind of like a safe haven for an internet exchange, so that it does not fall under the national regulatory authority, and they actually build it. So that I think there's a significant change in the mindset of a lot of these governments lately, and they want to participate in the digital economy, which they can't if they're not moving.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Just before we move on to Wael, are there any questions in the audience or anything that was unclear that you'd like to clarify? If not, we have some fantastic additional examples from Egypt, I think. So, if you'd like
Great,
to
thank you very much. It's definitely the most interesting times now in Egypt. I started 5 years ago in Google when there were 4 million internet users. Now we have 35 million internet users. We used to actually work very closely with local ISPs to put caching servers in their data centers, basically not to pay for French engineers, because we wanted actually content to be locally available in the country. One of the things that is very interesting is that Egypt is known for content production of books, production of cinemas, movies, production of many things, while in the internet space, a very famous newspaper like Al Masri Al-Yawm, who's the largest online newspaper that is being read, is actually hosted outside the country because there isn't enough caching servers to host it locally. So it's definitely after the revolution, as Mu'izz was saying, it's definitely becoming better. However, still exchanges are being owned by national telecommunication regulatory authorities. It is a very important cornerstone of the internet, but it is not as free as open as we want them to be. It is still sort of a safe haven, a place for people to get together and understand what's going on in the internet landscape. So from our point of view, as a technology provider, we actually do a couple of things. We've created an emerging markets access team, where we actually provide to exchanges like Tunisia caching servers, to ISPs caching servers. We also create what we call MLab, measurement lab. So very important, measurement lab, where it actually tells the user what kind of quality, price of the internet that he's getting. It's very important to tell the user the quality of the internet that he's getting. And we crowdsourced data. We crowdsourced data. It is not as smooth as in Tunisia. I think Egypt is blessed and cursed with 90 million people. So when you have 90 million people, consensus is very hard. But we're almost trying to get the concept of, you know, crowdsourced data. Just availing data about the internet quality, about the price of the internet. So bottom line is, the internet used to touch 4 million people, now it touches 35 million people. It is becoming an economic driver of, a lot of Egyptian households actually right now live on the internet. We have some amazing YouTube stars coming out of Egypt that are making, hundreds of thousands of dollars per month simply through advertising. So the ecosystem is working. We basically like to work. Strange enough, we work with regulatory authorities to get them basically to adopt the open and free. So that's basically my 2 cents on this.
Thank you very much. Just to ask you briefly, what does it mean to get the regulatory authorities to accept this? What does that in substantive terms mean?
Sure. So first of all, we don't want them to own exchanges. I don't think that's not their business. Their business is to issue licenses and just step out of the way, literally. I'm not sure I've offended any NTRA people here, but in general, we moved from a regime where everything was controlled. So, for example, YouTube was not locally launched in Egypt before the 9th of March. The 9th of March 2011 is an important date because it is the day where the state security fell down. So we were able to launch a local domain without basically getting approvals from the regulatory authorities. But the difficult thing is to get all ISPs working together as well, is to get all ISPs working together and create this federation of ISPs to compete, yet at the same time cooperate. And that's the difficulty.
Sounds like a tricky question with no easy answer, but definitely worth working towards. Are there any questions in the audience? We've been bashing France a lot, so I was wondering if anybody from France wanted to respond, but...
Well, I guess that's normal, right?
Please.
How do you explain the rise of internet use in Egypt from 5 to 35 million? Is it like, is the infrastructure getting better, or were there like more people with, I don't know, money to buy a computer?
So I think there are 2 important factors. ISPs have telecom operators have acquired ISPs. So they basically pushed a huge marketing message to everybody saying the internet is the way forward. Obviously their voice traffic, their voice revenues were going down because it's 112% saturated market. The second thing is that there's a lot of local content that Egyptians wanted to access but couldn't find online. You know, state TV sucked, still does. The information that Egyptians were getting through their normal channel, which were the state-run, monopolized TV stations, was very bad. So basically, people used the internet to get information about what was happening in their own country. So you actually used to go to Al Jazeera, you used to go to YouTube to understand what's happening in Tahrir Square, compared to your local channel or news agency.
Any further questions or comments? If not, we'll proceed on to our next presentation, which is by Gillian York from the Electronic Frontier Foundation.
Thank you. I will admit openly that in terms of the technicalities of IXPs, I'm actually learning probably as much as you are from the audience. And so, what I find is really interesting is that a lot of the focus has been on quality and price. And while I do agree that those things are very important, I'm just going to share my own ISP story from where I live to point out why there are other things that I think are equally important. So when I lived on the east coast of the US, I had 2 choices for internet in Boston at the time. And those were both looped in with cable television packages. They were expensive. They were out of my reach, actually. And at one point, I didn't even have internet because I couldn't afford it at home because it would have required me to own a television, et cetera, et cetera. So then when I moved to San Francisco, I was very surprised at the wealth of ISPs available there. I'm not sure why that is. It would be great if you could tell me, but... Yeah, everything is there, it's true. But there was one ISP that I had the choice where, I think only one actually, where it was very easy to get it without cable television. So I said, I'm going to go with that one. And as I began to look into it more, and of course I'd just started at my job at the Electronic Frontier Foundation at the time, I learned that my ISP is also the best on data retention practices and law enforcement. And I think that this is really important as well, because when you have these different choices, when you have the choice to go beyond these giant, whether they're monopolies or not, but these giant companies that are often pretty poor in their data practices, let alone sometimes their neutrality practices. I think we've all heard about some of the T-Mobile things in the US. You also have the choice of choosing a company that is willing to stand up for you in court, a company that does not hold on to your data beyond a certain point. And this is something that EFF does quite a bit of research on. We have a thing called Who Has Your Back, which lists a number of these companies as well as other social networks and whatnot, but in terms of their practices like that. And I think that that's another reason, in addition to the issues around quality and price, that we should be thinking about. And I do also, I think it's also really, just switch a page. Notable, Moaz, what you said about Tunisia engaging with civil society. I know you mentioned the conference that's upcoming in June. I'm looking forward to it. But beyond that, I think that what I'd be curious, and I feel bad, I'm going to throw this back at you, but so right now, I think you're in an excellent position. You've just created 2 IXPs. Tunisia has been putting itself on the front lines in terms of freedom of expression online in the region and in a lot of places, frankly. But how can Tunisia institute this in the long term? Is that through IXPs? Does it involve other elements to ensure the same level of neutrality in the future?
Yeah, it's working. So I already said that if you need to this model to develop further and to keep those achievements for the future generation, I think the right answer will be that the civil society need to be engaged. The local civil society need to be engaged. It's not a matter of the government anymore. Before, when we deal with the internet, it was something that a subject that a taboo subject for government officials who do not deal with this. So we cannot discuss with the civil society. We cannot really express ourselves in different areas in the IGF. We've never been in the IGF before. We didn't believe that the IGF is a very good space for debate before. Now, actually, there is a lot of change, and the civil society is required to be engaged on all debates, including privacy, data retention. You mentioned very, very important remark about it. I think this is one of the important things, because actually the government has a huge reform related to the internet. And so we will expect somehow a law on data retention, for example. But if the civil society don't know data retention, if activists just focus on censorship as an achievement for the revolution, it's not enough. We need to keep working. We need to keep those debates on, and this is what ITI is for today. We need to push the debate. We need to try to communicate with all Tunisians about those aspects, and this is very important, I think. We cannot really achieve with this conference everything is achieved. No, we say it is a very good step for us to get the civil society involved in the conference. Our actual young generation have to be involved in this kind of conference to learn from different experts, to learn from different experiences, and I think this is very important for the future.
But then I have a question to both Moaz and Wael. So we're talking about internet exchange points in some way or another, but basically what we're talking about is internet infrastructure. And how is that then important to build an open internet, or to also safeguard? What are your experiences both from Tunisia and Egypt?
So I think it's like an airport. There's a lot of similarities between airports and internet exchanges. So basically, although airlines compete, they also have to cooperate together, because and the airport is the place where it actually organizes this. There are a lot of maturity models of internet exchanges. Some people prefer internet exchanges to be NGOs. Some people prefer internet exchanges to be semi-public organizations. But at the same time, there has to be a revenue model. There has to be obviously a cost structure. And I don't want to be too technical, but it does not have to be a layer 3 sort of. This is a switch. At the end of the day, it is a switch. You're ISP 1, I'm ISP 2. Coincidentally, you own a news portal. You should actually tell me your news portal so that my subscribers can access this. To cooperate with the competition is something that we're learning in our part of the world. It is very difficult to cooperate with competition because I want to eat my competition heart out, right? I want to get them out of business. That's what we learn. But the reality of the internet is that you actually have to, for lack of a better word, you have to love your competitors and actually work with them because they create a bigger ecosystem or a bigger play. And when it touches the economics of people, when it touches the money, the income, the coming to people, then at the end of the day, an ISP choice is just an ISP choice. It's a consumer choice.
I would just need to comment about what you mentioned. It's very important what you said, because we had been, as I mentioned, for years an internet exchange point, but not a real one, as I mentioned, not declared because of censorship for sure, but also because we're running an IP layer 3 infrastructure. So I think now what we are doing is just to transform the model, because we cannot really be an IP transit service provider and at the same time running an internet exchange point. What we have doing now is just to say, okay, the internet exchange point will be governed by a board, an independent board with all competitors, all members in the board. So the decision will be made by all members, by all competitors, and those and so we can ensure that the infrastructure for the exchange point is open for anybody and for any actor, and at the same time is the cost-based infrastructure. So yeah.
I just want to quickly say something that, my experience is that it's 5% technical and 95% political. When you try to create an exchange, there has to be a lot of work with the government done, a lot of actually changing legislation when it comes to data retention, freedom of expression. The law itself has to change. Technicalities of whether it's a layer 2 or layer 3 switch is easy.
I'd like to agree. But for me, this is groundwork in building a digital economy in a country. And there's really several stages of market development. And one is basically using the rest of the world's internet or content. And the second stage is through a local exchange, through enabling your local carriers to work together, really start also building local content, being able to have service providers there in this. And what Julian described actually is kind of like stage 3 in the market, what we still have not reached in the developed countries, and that is just, in the broadband developed countries, sorry, let's be clear there, that there's actually moving beyond internet exchanges, which is moving into the regional or the local city exchanges and having a service exchange there. IXPs do the same for carriers and ISPs, that they actually can choose from different service providers. And actually enabling the individual user to switch over their services from today to tomorrow, that is just happening now. There is in Canada, they did something in the Netherlands. There's one city where they did this. They built a local fiber optic network, but all the service providers are just using the same fiber optic network, but you can actually switch the services and your TV service, your internet service, your telephony service. You have a whole menu of providers who will give you that. But that is only now happening, and I think it will take a couple of years before we'll reach that in other countries.
But it's interesting here because I'm hearing sort of two different things. On the one hand, this is a very important economic issue to develop in sort of an economic ecosystem and the infrastructure of the internet. But it's 95% political. So what's essentially being said here is we need the right conditions to allow things to grow, but the politics gets in the way. This was a censorship system. This was a system where YouTube couldn't even exist in certain ways. It was extremely limited in its ability to act. How is that then linking to the wider? We always seem to have these conversations about economics and not about politics, as if it's somehow devoid from the sort of the actual human lives, and yet at the same time we're currently having a discussion in Germany for weeks now about one provider deciding that it's going to ignore any kind of net neutrality and just have bandwidth caps on any kind of connection from a set period onward. This seems to me a similar topic which seems initially technical, but when you actually get to it, it's real people's lives, it's regulation, it's how do you see that? I mean, I guess for the EFF this must be a really important question as well, right?
Just one sentence. Actually, I think the governments who are willing to move in that respect have been clearly identified in Dubai, in the World Telecommunications Conference. There were some who are willing to move and some who want to re-regulate the internet, let's put it like this, and that became very clear there. Or should I name them?
No, I mean, for us, like I said, it's about having consumer options, and so it's about having the option to basically talk with your money, to move from an ISP that is not treating you right in whatever way that might be it in cost or bandwidth caps or censorship, et cetera, to choosing a company that works for you. And so by enabling that, by enabling all of those options, we are essentially allowing consumers to do that, allowing them to talk with their money and vote with their feet, so to speak.
Well, I guess in many parts of the world, there are no choices on this, right? It's one thing if consumers have choices between ISPs, but I guess in some parts of the world, as we were hearing in Tunisia, there was a central point, and then that was controlled, and that was it. So there was no consumer choice in the matter whether you were using the ATI's infrastructure, right?
There is 5 ISPs in Tunisia, but the problem is not just with the ISPs themselves, it's because we opened the internet market since 1998, so 1997, sorry. So the problem is when you have unique IP transit service provider, that means that all the ISPs have to route their traffic via one point, which was used to be the ITI. Exactly. So actually, when we build internet exchange point and neutral internet exchange point, that means that the ISPs can connect to each other without ITI infrastructure, layer 3 infrastructure, and then we open the market in the international level to say, okay, also the routes have to be open to competition. But there is a comment here about, because when we are launching the internet exchange point, the argument that put on the table by government officials saying, okay, this is also why you need to be the unique internet exchange point in the country. You need to have more than internet exchange point. But the reason for that, because they consider that the internet exchange points are in competition. But this is not the case. We need to launch an internet exchange point when the economic model is available, when there are a lot of members that decide to connect in one point. This is one of the arguments, because there is confusing competition with ISPs and competition, and not competition, let me say cooperation between internet exchange point. Yeah.
That's fascinating, because I guess it's also suggesting that on the one hand you're competing, but on the other hand, you use this beautiful phrase to eat your competitor's heart out. It's like this, especially as a large company like Google, and you're obviously competing and you're a strong place in the market. Why would you have an incentive to peer with or to work closely with small regional or even like tiny little IXPs?
Well, we love the internet. The internet has been very kind to us. And we also see that there are incredible economic, social, and cultural opportunities for a country like Egypt to export products and services, to actually be a regional hub for for local Arabic content creation. Let me give you an example. The Czech Republic has 10 million people and has more Czech content online than the 350 million Arabic-speaking people in Middle East and North Africa. So if you type the word, Naguib Mahfouz, or a Nobel laureate, Egyptian Nobel laureate, he would have more articles in English than in Arabic. So it's incredible. So we have a vested interest to grow local content creation, because the content drives the user, and the user drives the advertiser. And the advertiser has also been good to us. Advertising money has been good to us as well. So it's the whole ecosystem. It's the whole ecosystem that it starts with, if you grow the internet base and you grow the local content creation, more and more users will come into the playground, and more advertisers will run after them.
Are there any questions? Please. We have a microphone. Fantastic, thanks.
Hi, Thomas Ackermann, CTO at Planet Romeo. I'm wondering, the internet exchanges are like the holy grail of peering, private and public peering. The internet as like a fundamental cornerstone that it exchanges all traffic through. Now you've said that you are like a safe haven in each country to exchange the data, but would you care to comment on the risks of that? How much protection you have? You can tell that very few people are aware of how big a role these exchange pointers play. You can see that in the audience, there's a couple of people compared to the one before. If you see a threat that, since we talked about censorship and net neutrality, that the influence directly on those peering points by, let's say in the United States, by the NSA or so, how much pressure do you actually see? Do you see a risk in there? And do you think you have the ability to voice your concerns or defend against that if that actually happens? Thank you.
Okay, Actually, I had the same concerns when D6 management suggested to move into Dubai for an exchange. I was kind of like, well, is this really a place we want to go? Because I was very concerned about censorship and access by government agencies to the exchange, for example. As it stands today, I can say that we were able to put it in the contract that the only person with access to the switches are us, as our management, as our D6 management. So for now, I can say that at least for the exchange itself, there is no censorship. However, having said that, obviously if the physical presence at site is obviously something which we can't influence. If tomorrow some black hat guys would be there and say, okay, whatever, I want to disconnect the fiber, there's not much we can do about it. So the law is there, the regulation is there, but what the I don't know, the secret the Secret Service would do, we can currently not influence. So that might become a problem. As it is today, and we see that there is really a drive for an open internet exchange, that the legislation has been put into place, and we're very confident that it will stay this way.
Would you also like to respond? Was you? Okay. Are there any further questions? Please.
Hi, my name is Patrick, and I'm a policy researcher at the Open Technology Institute in Washington, D.C. And I guess this is sort of maybe a clarification more than a question, but in North America and Europe, most of the internet exchange points were initially like privately run, right? And so in the countries that you listed where internet exchanges are now being developed, are those run by governments, or are they still like privately based models? And if you could just comment quickly on what the implications for one or the other would be in countries that are developing IXPs.
So I think there's a maturity model of internet exchanges. I think it starts with basically a government-owned sort of entity, but eventually, as the internet touches, millions of lives, the government is not very well known to be extremely, fast in doing things. I think technology is changing so fast. So I think as we move onwards, it should be, I think, a federation of ISPs. So we all have a vested interest for this place to work under the right laws, under the right regulations. And it should also have a government representative, because as the law, for example, privacy, data retention, security laws changes, we should work very closely with a government official to change the laws. But I guess we're in stage one in our parts of the world, where it's still run by the regulatory authorities. The good news is that they've heard us, and that they are moving away from taking control of the exchanges to actually allowing all players, at least tier 1 and tier 2 players, to play in this game.
For Tunisia, it's all the same. When ITI was created in 1996, it was a totally governmental company. So the Internet Exchange Point starts from a governmental company that is owned totally by the government through different shareholders, but totally controlled by the government. But we move with the privatization of the market, with the opening of the market. We move from a totally company that is owned by the state. Now we are dealing with an opening the shares and restructure of the capital of ITI. But what I mentioned, that this is ITI, that is the internet service provider, internet IP transit service provider. And for the IXP, for the Internet Exchange Point to IXP, it will be under an umbrella of a consortium. And I don't agree with when you say the board have to be, there is member from the government. Because I think that we need to keep it as neutral as possible, but just members, if the government want to be a member with their governmental network or whatever I can mention, so they can join the board. Otherwise, I don't need to appoint a member of the government in the board by themselves. So it's very important to deal with just the board is for members of the Internet Exchange Point. But I know that the government will join us if they land the governmental network IP. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. because my viewpoint obviously is a bit different. If you look at the really successful IXPs in the world, there's hardly any, or let's say all of them are actually neutral exchanges, as in it's even carrier neutral. The company who operates them is carrier neutral, and it's typically a not-for-profit company. So even the ones corporations have established as a business model have mostly not been so successful. So the I have to say European model, and it is in a way to have these as individual entities which are owned by a group of carriers more or less and per se neutral, has been the most successful. And even in North America right now they're trying to build these types of exchanges. There's been a number of calls for establishment of these. So I believe that more and more countries will come to that model, and then there's the biggest incentive, obviously, to join. And I have to say, even the not-for-profit part is very important there, because then otherwise it's either a government which has certain interests, or it's a company who wants to make a profit which has certain interests. But if you really want to exchange data neutrally and free and with the highest available bandwidth at the lowest possible cost, then there's just one model.
Good afternoon, Hamad Radwan. Please excuse my ignorance on the technical aspects, but I'm just trying to grasp the whole concept here. They're quite new to me. What comes to mind is an article I read yesterday in the New York Times talking about this French billionaire and how with the ISPs over there, he's really gone in and really provided the service at a really low rate when these three major companies called the cartel in the article kind of saw this guy as a threat. He could afford to do this as individual, as a billionaire. He's like this philanthropist, what new economy evangelist actually is what they call him. My question or comment is that I see that as much as we want to get away from the regulatory public aspect of government, places like Egypt where they move slow and there's corruption there, I fear, the privatization of this and the levels of corruption that we have still existing in North America would actually, I don't know, if they would hinder or not. And what this gentleman just said about being non-profit, I think is really important, because otherwise I think it would be at the detriment of the millions of users. So.
Actually, if you look at the success of exchange points like M6, D6 or Links, the competition authorities would have had a very hard look at these points if they were not completely carrier neutral and everybody could join with exactly the same prices and everything, and it's not run by one entity basically, which is not also jointly owned by these carriers. So I think that's very important. If one company would have built an exchange point which holds that much market power, at least in Europe, it would be gone by now. So,
are there any other questions or comments? Because if not, no. Okay. I have a specific question which regards, we had the example before of Dubai, to the misuse of exchange points. So what would you do in your respective situations if you felt that the exchange point either you operate or you're directly linked to, or in this case, an exchange point the EFF was aware of, was being misused in some way, or a way that you felt was like overbroad, not just with regulation, but with specific steps taken by, let's say, by governmental actors? How would you respond to that? Yes.
Yeah. I think one of the most important thing is with the Internet Exchange Point is transparency. Yeah, and including transparency in the website. We have to know everything regarding the traffic that is switched via the equipment of an Internet Exchange Point. So this is to avoid also misuse. It could be also to mention that transparency is a principle of this Internet Exchange Point, and also, as I mentioned before, and I repeat it again, involvement of the civil society with the Internet Exchange Point. This is something that's very important. With Open Lab, with Open Innovation Labs, with MLab. We have MLab actually in Tunisia. We run the server on MLab in Tunis. So it's very important for us to keep the measurement lab, for example, as an enabler for the civil society to get involved with the Internet Exchange Point and to know what is really switched with our equipment or not. Yeah.
For me, I would just like to quickly add that the wisdom of the crowd is just unbeatable. When millions and millions of people sort of want something, it's an incredible pressure on governments, on corporations. I'll give you a very small example. When there was a potential blockage of YouTube a couple of months ago in Egypt, and the data showed that YouTube is actually making millions of dollars to both private individuals, to corporations, and to ISPs. So all of us, and us included, of course, we had a vested interest, but all of us went to the government and said, you know what, you have to actually stop this court order. You have to intervene because millions of dollars will be lost to the country, and a lot of people, their livelihood will be stopped. And I think nothing beats millions and millions of people complaining about, either misuse, so it's a very, very democratic way of doing things.
Just as a question, because this was an example specifically with the Google product, but would this be the same if a specific part, let's say, of the internet infrastructure, like an exchange point, were threatened in its ability to function in that way?
I agree about the idea that it should not be. I'm not sure about the choice of Dubai, but I wouldn't comment. But the country itself has to be locally and from a legal point of view protects a lot of things that are given for granted in the Western world. So there's a huge difference between the East and the West Coast in the US. I personally felt it firsthand. But if you even move to Europe and you move to other parts of the world, it becomes a very difficult, proposition. It is still expensive. The internet is still expensive. It doesn't touch the daily lives of millions of people as we want them to be. And at the same time, the quality of the internet is not 100% according to the Bay Area kind of benchmark.
And I was just going to say, you asked what would we do. I think Tunisia is a great example here, because what did we do when the ATI before Moaz was involved in censorship? We continuously and repeatedly supported Tunisians in speaking out against it. And then when the ATI became independent, we supported the ATI's fight against the government trying to implement censorship. And so, I think that would be our response if that were the case. Of course, I'm speaking narrowly about censorship again, because this is a tough issue this is a tough topic for me as well. But I think that when it comes to things like that, that would absolutely be our response.
I can only quickly comment that we've put it in our operations contract that we can walk away if we don't feel comfortable, and we will. So it's as simple as that. As long as we operate this exchange, the European rules will apply, period.
It's quite a strong statement. Are there any further questions or comments that people would like to add? If not, then I thank the participants for a wonderful session, and thank you for coming, and